In this example, we're going to look at how you can take an image into the software, fit vectors to the colours within that image, and then use those vectors to calculate a toolpath. In this case, you can see the image that we're going to use at the top of the screen, and you can see the result of VCarve toolpath based on that image shown in the bottom part of the screen here. I'm going to cover a number of different tools. I'm going to show you how to import the image into the software, how to resize it, and then the specialty tool for fitting vectors to the outside of the colours within that image. Then we're going to calculate a VCarve toolpath for that, and also show you how we can use different editing tools within the software to manipulate the vectors that we've created, specifically the Fit Curves tool and the Node Editing tool. So let's go ahead and start a new copy of the software. So let's start by clicking on the icon to create a new file. We're going to set up a job which is going to be 12 inches in X, so width 12, 4 inches in Y, so height 4, material Z0 is going to be off the top of the block. We'll set the thickness of our material to 3/4 of an inch, and I'm going to set the datum position in the lower left hand corner, so that means that this position where the red square is will be X0, Y0, and we're set to work in inches. Let's click on the button, hit OK. So now we've created our blank workspace, we want to import the image that we're going to fit vectors to. So I'm going to come down to the File Operations area of the Drawing tab, and on the end of the first row there's an icon which is Import Bitmap for Tracing. I'm going to click on that icon. That will let me browse on my PC so I can navigate around into the appropriate project folder, and there I'll find a file called poster.jpg. So this is a JPEG image file. I'm going to select that file and I'm going to hit open. When we import an image, it's placed in the middle of the job, as you can see on the screen, and the software also creates a new special layer and puts that image onto it. The layers are a way we have of organising data inside the software, and they'll be dealt with in detail in the other tutorials. Here though, I'll just point out where this special layer has been created. If we click on the down arrow here for the layer list, we can see we've got our default layer 1 that was created when we made the new job, but we've also now got this layer called Bitmap Layer, and that's where the image has been placed. So if I click on the light bulb to make that layer invisible, we'll see that the image disappears. I can click on the light bulb again to make it appear, and so this is just a nice way to keep the data easily managed. Once we've created our vectors from this image, we may want to switch the image off to make the 2D view less confused and make it easier to select data from it. Again, as I mentioned before, these layers will be dealt with in great detail throughout the tutorials. Let's go ahead and hit the close button here. Now I'm going to resize my image. I could do this manually by just clicking on the image again, which will put it into the transform mode, showing me these little white squares on each corner, which are the handles that I can use to drag the size of the part. If I was to click on one of these and hold the mouse key down and drag, then it's going to stretch the image up and down using its opposite corner as an anchor point. If I hold the shift key down on the keyboard while I'm resizing it, then that will use the center of the image as an anchor point, which is what I'd want to do in this case. So once I've resized it, I can let go of the mouse and that'll show me the image at the new size. We could also size this object more precisely by coming over, clicking on the icon here under Transform Objects to set selected object size, and typing in an exact value for its size. So here I'm going to set the anchor in the center. I'm going to type in a width of 11, hit apply and close, and there we've sized our image now. So now we're ready to fit our vectors around the outside edge of the colors in the bitmap. Make sure that your image is still selected, which will be indicated by this dashed line around the outside. If it isn't, then just click on it. And then we're going to come over to the icon here under Create Vectors, which is Trace Bitmap, Fit Vectors to Selected Bitmap. I'm going to click on that icon, and now we come into the form where we can define the parameters to determine how we're going to fit the vectors to the colors within the image. The first choice that we have is whether to treat the image as color or black and white. When I have the color option selected, the software will reduce the number of colors in the image down to 16 and show me those 16 colors here in a grid. If I choose the black and white option, then it's just going to simplify it into simply deciding that the pixels are either going to be black or white, which would give me the area that I would fit the vectors around the outside of. And I have this threshold slider to determine whether I want to increase the amount. You can see more will be covered there, or reduce that amount where less will be selected. So if the image is quite simple, like we've got here, we may be able to get a reasonable result using the black and white option. On a more complex image, you'd probably use the color option. As I say, this has reduced the number of colors in the image down to 16. I could reduce this further if I want by using the slider to simplify it even more. And then it's a case of choosing the colors from the grid here, and each of these will be highlighted with whatever I've got selected for my trace color a little bit further down here. So if I click on the down arrow, you could see I could pick different colors, and all this does is indicate in the image the different colors that I have currently selected. So if I click on one of these, you can see it's highlighted in red. I could change my trace color, say to orange there, and really you just want to pick a trace color that is very different to any of the other colors that you've got in your image to make it clear what you have selected. Fitting these vectors is a very iterative process. So what you're going to do is choose different sets of colors and vary the values you've got down the bottom here, and then just take a look and see the results you're getting and try and determine which one is going to be best for what you're trying to do with that particular graphic. So in this case, I might go ahead and pick the second color here. So I've got what looks like a reasonable set of pixels selected from the image. Then I could come down, and at the moment I'm going to leave the corner fitting value and the noise filter set to their median values here, 50% and 5. Bitmap fading I'm going to leave at 50%, and we're going to look at the value of that in a moment. And I'm just going to hit preview. By hitting preview, the software is going to take the current settings that I've chosen within the form and show me the vector that it would create based on that particular set of parameters. If I'm happy with those, then I can just go ahead and hit apply and close. What I'm more likely to do though is try different variations, maybe selecting additional colors or adjusting things like the corner fit and the noise filter values here. For instance, on the corner fitting, if I just put this up to 100% and come down and hit preview, I can see that what I've got there is basically everything interpreted pretty much as a straight line, which is definitely not what I want. If it's not clear what you're seeing with regard to the vectors here, this is where the bitmap fading becomes valuable, because I can fade the image more. So we might drag this down to about 90%, and now I can see these vectors more clearly. You can see how faceted these vectors are with the corner fitting set to 100%. If we back this off again down to around 50, hit preview, we can see we get a smoother set of vectors now. Again, also with the noise filter here, if I want, I can set my noise filter higher, and what the software is going to do is then ignore any areas that have less than 10 pixels within the vector. So if I preview that, that might reduce some of the things I've got selected. In this case, it's knocked out this little piece inside of the O there, and that's not going to be helpful to me because I do want to include that. So we can reduce that value down again, hit preview, and now I can see that once again it's picked up that area there which I would like to include. So we just continue to work through trying different options until we're happy that we've got the best result we can get for our particular application from the image that we're working with. Once I am happy with the vectors that I've created, then you just go ahead and hit apply and close, and the software will come out of the trace bitmap function and it will deselect the image. So you can see now in my 2D view I've got my image, I've also got my vectors there as well, but it's a little tricky to see where those vectors are in the image. There's a couple of things I could do to help myself. One would be to change the amount of fade that is on the image. So I could click on the image here, then right mouse click, and from the menu I could choose object properties. If I select that, then I can change the amount of fade that I've got when it's not selected within the 2D view. So maybe we could up that to say 75% and hit close. Or if I'm finished using the image, then what I can do is switch off the layer that the image is on. If you remember, I said this had been automatically placed on a layer called Bitmap Layer. So if we come up, click on the down arrow here for the layer list, come to the Bitmap Layer, and then just click on the light bulb to switch it off, and that will switch off the image for the moment. And at any time though, we could go back into the layer list and switch that on again. Now I'm going to come up and just delete these extra vectors we created here that we don't need. So I'm going to click and drag a box holding the mouse key down, and then let go when they're completely enclosed within it. And then on the keyboard I'm going to find the delete key, and I'm going to press that in order to delete those selected vectors. So I'll show you in a moment how we could make further edits to the vectors we've created if we wanted to. But let's just go ahead and show you that we can take even a pretty raw set of vectors like we've generated and calculate a toolpath for them. If I come down and click on the icon here to switch to Toolpaths tab, that'll minimize the drawing tab and it'll open the Toolpaths tab on the right. I'm going to click on the button for my material setup, so I'm going to click the Set button here, and I'm going to check the values. At the moment we have our material set for Z0 at the top of the block. That means that when I set this up on my machine, I'm going to set it so that the tool Z0 position is the top of my material. Set the thickness of my material as 3/4 of an inch. The XY datum or XY0 position is in the lower left hand corner, and I've got these default values for my rapid clearance, which is 1/4 inch above the material, and the home position, which is at X0, Y0, and a Z position 1/2 inch above the top of the material. I'm happy with those values, so I'm going to hit OK. So I'd like to select our vectors and calculate a VCarve toolpath to engrave them into our material. Going to click in the upper left hand corner here, and then just hold the mouse key down, drag a box to completely enclose all the vectors in the part, then let go so that they're selected. I'm going to come up, and from the Toolpath tab I'm going to select the VCarve toolpath here, so click on the icon there. I'm going to go with a start depth of 0, so it's going to machine into the top of our material, and I'm going to come down, and from the tool area of the form I'm going to hit the select button. And from the tool database, I'm going to choose the V-bit here, the 90-degree V-bit, 1¼ inch diameter. Let's go ahead and hit OK. And I'm just going to take the default values. If you are planning to machine this, you should ensure that you have chosen a tool and values for that tool and the machining parameters that are appropriate for your particular machine and the material you're working with, particularly to ensure that the values you've chosen will be safe to cut. Here I'm going to come down and we'll change the toolpath name. We'll call this VCarve text. I'm going to hit calculate, and the software will calculate the toolpath for me, automatically open the preview toolpaths form here, and show me the 3D view. So this is a virtual piece of material in the 3D view and the toolpath that it's calculated for that particular set of vectors. What I can do here is I could click in the 3D view and rotate this around by holding the mouse key down and moving the mouse. We could come up and use the different preset views here. I could click on this icon to go into the ISO view, and then I could choose what material I'd like to preview this in here. I'm just going to choose cherry, as we've already got that selected from the list of materials, and I'm going to click on the button that says preview selected toolpath. What the software will do now is animate the toolpath into my virtual piece of material, and it will show me at the end of that what the part I'm going to cut will look like. If I want to, I could colour the inside of that toolpath so I can see that a little more clearly. If I come over the area of the form where it says machined area colour, I'm going to choose the option for Toolpath Color. I'm going to click on the little arrow here to drop down my choice of colours. And in this case, let's just pick a simple grey colour so that we can see how that's going to be engraved within our piece of material there. So in this case, based on the fairly low quality of image we're working with, that actually looks quite reasonable. And if I was happy that that was good enough for me to machine, then I can go ahead and close my preview toolpath form here and save my toolpath to send to the CNC. To do that, I would ensure it was selected in the list. In this case, we only have one, so it's automatically selected. Come up and click on the icon to save toolpath. Here it would show me in the list the toolpath that I'm going to save, and then I would use the drop down for the post-processor list here to find the appropriate post-processor for my particular machine or control software. You can see there are a great number of these available within the software for me to select. Once I'm happy and that I've chosen one that's appropriate for my particular machine, then I can hit the Save Toolpaths button, find a folder on the PC where I want to save this to, give it a name that's going to indicate to me the toolpath that it is, go ahead and hit Save, and then I would take that toolpath and that would be put onto a memory stick or across a network or however I get the data to my CNC controller. And then you could put that across to your controller and actually carve the logo that you can see in front of you here. If I go ahead and just hit close now on this though, it may be that I decide I would like to tidy up a few areas of this and make some additional edits to it before I calculate my final toolpath and output it to the CNC. So let's take a moment to look at how we could go back to our vectors and start to make changes to them. So I want to go back and access my design tools and also the view where I've got the vectors. So I'm going to click on the icon here to switch to Drawing tab. So that will minimize the Toolpaths tab and reopen the Drawing tab for me. Then you can see I've got two tabs here, one that says New, and currently we're on the one that says 3D View. If I click on the one that says New, that will go back into the 2D view, and there I can see my vectors that are currently selected from us calculating that toolpath. If I want to deselect those, then I can just go ahead and click in the white space here on any area where there isn't a vector, and that will just show them now as unselected. The software has a great deal of different editing tools for manipulating your vectors. These are dealt with in detail throughout all the other tutorials. Here I'd just like to show you a couple of those that could be beneficial to help us tidy up the data that we've created here. First thing I want to do is show you a tool to automatically fit curves to the vectors. I'm going to select a particular set of vectors to do this to. I'm going to click on this outline here to select it, then holding the Shift key down on the keyboard I'm going to click on this outline to add it to that selection, and still holding Shift down on the keyboard I'm going to click on the outline for the flourish here. So we have three different vectors selected there. Now I'm going to come across and click on the icon here to fit curves to selected vectors. In here I can specify to fit arcs, Bezier curves or straight lines. In this case I'm going to choose Bezier curves because they're easiest to edit, and then we specify a tolerance. Now the software is going to alter the vector within that distance, so the vector will change, and you shouldn't use this function if you have vectors that have crucial dimensions to them. This is definitely going to alter the data a little bit. In this case it doesn't really matter because what we're doing is just trying to create a nice smooth looking outline for our vectors. I'm going to choose the option to replace selected vectors. I'm not going to worry about sharp corners too much in this case because we don't have a set of vectors that have any particularly sharp corners attached to them. And then I'm going to hit the preview option, and that will show me a new set of nodes attached to the vector and the changes it will make to the vector. In this case I'm happy with that. I can see it smoothed out some of the anomalies that I had in some of these areas here, and so I can go ahead and just hit OK, and then we'll go back to our regular 2D view with those vectors still selected. So let's just click again to deselect those. So the curve fitting is a nice way to simplify my vectors and to help smooth them out. The ultimate way to manipulate a vector though is to do what we call node editing. And this lets me get to the individual constituent parts of any particular vector. So in this case I'm going to edit this vector here. I'm going to select that by clicking on it in the 2D view. I'm going to come up and choose the option to zoom selected. By clicking this icon here it's just going to take my selected object and make that the focus in the 2D view. Next, still with that vector selected, I'm going to come over and click on the icon here to go into node editing, and when we click on that with a single vector selected it's going to show me the individual pieces of that vector. Each vector is made up of lines which we call the spans, and these flow through the nodes which are these dark blue and black squares that you can see on the screen here. The white nodes are what we call the control handles, and you can see those attached to the nodes here, and if we click on those and move them by dragging the mouse, you can see that will help us to adjust the curvature of a particular vector through the node. Now, depending where the cursor is, we have different options available to us within the node editing. When we're over a span, as you can see here, I move the cursor over a span and that wavy line appears below the arrow. Then I can right mouse click and you can see I can convert that to a line, arc, insert a point, cut the vector, or delete the span. If I'm over a node, which we can see by, as we move the cursor here, you can see it changes to a crosshair. So if I'm over this node here, right mouse click, have the option to delete, smooth, cut, and make that the start point. In this case, I might choose to delete that point there, and we can see that's been eliminated, and then I might choose to click on the control handle here and just drag that out. So I've just smoothed that area out a little. Now it may be that I have a node like this which is not smooth. The dark blue nodes are smooth, the black nodes are not smooth. Therefore, if I move the handle for this node here, you can see that the line on the other side of it does not smoothly flow through that particular node. If I move that back up again, I might want to smooth this. I can right mouse click on it, choose the option to smooth point. I could come down to this one, right mouse click and say smooth point. And now what I could do is just drag these control handles to introduce some curvature into that particular part of the vector. I can move the nodes by clicking on them and dragging them, and again I can just keep manipulating these as much or as little as I want to add to the smoothness or the direction of a particular vector as it flows through a point within the drawing. So for this example, I'm not going to continue and node edit the whole part, but hopefully I've given you a flavour there of just what a powerful function this is. You'll see it used extensively throughout the other tutorials as we create and edit the vectors within our different designs. Here, let's just take the edits we've made and show you how we could reapply our toolpaths to these vectors. I'm going to come down and I'm going to click on the icon to go back to selection mode. That will exit node editing mode when I click on this arrow here. We're back into regular selection mode. I'm going to click on the icon here to zoom my 2D view to fit within the window. And then what I want to do is come across to the Toolpaths tab. So I'm going to click on the icon here to switch to the Toolpaths tab. What I want to do is edit my existing toolpath. So I'm going to select it, and then I'm going to come up and choose the icon here to edit the toolpath. That will come into the toolpath and it will automatically select the vectors that we had selected before that are associated with the toolpath. And you'll see that some of these vectors are no longer selected, and that's because we've actually changed that vector. So it isn't the same vector that it was previously, and therefore we'd need to reselect it in order to add it back into what the toolpath will be applied to. So here, holding the Shift key down, I'm going to click on this vector, click on this vector, click on this vector. I'm going to hit Calculate to recalculate the toolpath. I need to reset the preview. That's showing me the preview from the previous toolpath, and then click on the icon here to preview selected toolpath and take a look at the new version of the file. So there we can see how nice and smooth this area is now in that part where we were doing the node editing, and how if we wanted to continue our node editing we'd be able to work around the part, introducing sharp corners, smoothing areas that needed to be smoothed, and just generally tidying up the vectors if the particular job required that level of detail to be included. So before we conclude here, I'm just going to come up and save this file. Go File, Save As, and in the project folder there we'll just call this Liberator Logo TP to show that it has a toolpath in it, and we'll save that if you wanted to take a look at the finished file that I created. In this example we've looked at the process to go from an image to a machine part. You've seen how we can take what was a fairly low quality graphic, import that into the software, resize it, and then use the specialty tool to fit vectors to the outlines of colours within that image. Once we created those vectors, we're able to go across and quickly calculate and save a V-carving toolpath, which we would then be able to take to the CNC machine and cut. We also then looked at ways that you might want to edit the data that you generated. We showed you the way that you could take those vectors, fit curves to the outlines, and also how we could get in and individually edit the vectors using the node editing tools. These and many other ways that we can manipulate and edit vectors will be covered throughout the other tutorials. And that concludes this particular example.